Hey guys, this is AwesomeJohn22 coming in today with another review, and I promised in the outros of my last couple videos that this time around we would talk about a less good, I guess is the right word, classics figure than Hound, because we did just talk about Hound. And that figure, the figure we're going to focus on today, is this guy right here, Classic Grimlock. And I want to point out, just starting out, I do like this figure. It's something of a, like, the toy equivalent of a guilty pleasure movie for me. Doesn't mean it's a good figure. I'm going to talk a little bit about why, and I'm going to point out it does do a few clever things. I'm going to point those out, but overall, it's not what people wanted when they thought, when people think of a classics Grimlock, this isn't what they think of. If I recall correctly, the only time I've ever mentioned this figure was when I reviewed the, what was it, War for Cybertron, Grimlock, Voyager class Grimlock, I think it was. I mentioned that he's a better alternative to this one for a classics Grimlock. And so that's kind of the framing device I'm going to go with today. I'm going to talk a little bit about what this does that makes it not quite reach that level of goodness that you would expect from the classics line. And that's part of the reason why I'm starting him in this mode instead of doing my usual intro with the robot mode and then, oh, no, we want to start in alt mode and snap my fingers and, you know, the whole thing. Because the robot mode on this guy is just, it's not a bad robot mode. It's just a really lackluster Grimlock robot mode. And that's the best way I can put it. So and a lot of that comes from the transformation, which has some clever moments, but also has its issues. And so I'm gonna start here, and I'm gonna wait to reveal anything about the robot mode until we've gone through the transformation. So let's go ahead and take a look at this mode. We have, like a lot of Grimlocks, his head's really small in relation to the rest of his body, which doesn't really fit with a T-Rex. In fact, if somebody said, hey, what kind of dinosaur is that, and I didn't know anything about the figure, T-Rex probably wouldn't be my first choice, honestly. The only thing that kind of screams T-Rex is the tiny little arms. So, I don't know. I mean, I might say something like a Velociraptor first. Then I'd notice he didn't have the little claws, and then I'd think, maybe it's a T-Rex. Maybe it's just a smallish T-Rex with an undersized head. And yeah, it doesn't look too bad. It's got good articulation. The little front legs, the front arms rather, move. The legs rotate all the way. They have a bend at the knee. There's even some foot articulation. And the head does move up and down quite a decent distance. And the mouth does open. And he does one-up other Grimlocks in that he has tail articulation on all of these little articulation points. And we'll see why that is in a little bit. Well, I mean, I guess part of it could just be because they wanted articulation on the tail, but there's another reason. We'll see that in a minute. He has, if there's one thing I genuinely don't like about this mode, it's that he has this, I'll take this off and show it off, he has this post sticking up on his back, and it doesn't fold. I mean, it folds. It looks like it should fold down somewhere. Really, the best you can do is that. Otherwise, it sits there, and I'm looking at it now. Yeah, it has an actual rod through it. It doesn't just click in there, so you can't just pop it out if you don't want it. And all it does is it supports this, I don't know, kind of bayonet weapon, which did have a missile in it at one point, but say it with me, guys at home, I lost it. I actually lost it just today when I was reacquainting myself with the transformation of the figure. Shot it off into the corner. No idea where it went. I looked for an hour. Couldn't find it. That's really my luck when it comes to spring-loaded missile gimmicks. I can attest to the fact that it shoots really frickin' far. So, it's got that going for it. And, he's got light piping in his robot eyes. You can actually see it really well right now through this crystal on the top. And he does have one of these little rub sign Autobot symbols. You can kind of see it fading. Let's see if I can get it. There we go. Very cool. And it doesn't take a lot to get it to show up, which is nice. Paint on him is really nice. He's got this really cool, like, dark wash over him that's really fantastic. You got gold. You've got kind of a goldish plastic in the head, and in this chest, and in the legs. That kind of makes him look more panely and like the Dinobot's always looked kind of ancient. He kind of has that same look, and I like that a lot. Not really sure what this is. Maybe it's like wire or something. But lots of gold all the way through. Lots of black all the way through. Just, it's very nice. Very nicely painted, and it doesn't look bad. It's clearly a dinosaur. It looks good. It's a good-looking dinosaur. You can lift him up and angle the head down and get kind of the more classic Grimlock stance, even. So there's not, like... There's not a huge problem with this mode. It's the way the figure handles everything else that just kind of drives me batty. So let's go ahead and let's take a look at that. To transform this guy, it's not super complicated. We're going to remove the weapon first. Kind of set it aside, and we're going to take this whole section here. You can see it comes up all the way up to here. We're just going to unslot it. Oh, there's his head. It's right there. And his entire tail just sits off to the side, for now at least. It will have a purpose later, it's just not a very good purpose. Next we're going to take, you can see, there's kind of these little clips sticking into this section. We're going to undo those clips and free that up. And then just extend this forward like so. And just kind of leave it for now. This panel here is on a rotation. It doesn't need to be, I don't understand why it is. We're going to come up here to the top, and we're going to take this here, rotate this so that there's clearance here, and rotate this up. And we're going to rotate this around, and I do like that. It's a very clever way to get the legs into the position you want them for everything to work. Next we're going to take this, fold it over, just kind of, I guess, bring that back against the back. I guess that's the best place to put it, really. Next we're going to take this here, rotate it around. We're going to rotate this around like so. You know, and I'm sure you can kind of see where this is going at this point. And then these will fold down. And if you look underneath here, there's these little tabs underneath there. I think those are supposed to like kind of try to hold this into place, but I can't see why, because they don't actually. I mean, there's these. Raise the camera up a little bit because I'm not really getting it in frame as much as I'd like to. There's these little slots here, but they don't line up at all. So these just end up kind of sitting there impotently doing nothing. And then this section folds down like so, and it folds down about that far. If you leave this out, it can fold down all the way, but I mean that's fine. Grimlock usually has kind of a kibbly back section anyway. Next we're going to take these, we're just going to fold them back so that they're kind of flush with the rest of the arms, and you can do it like this, it doesn't really matter. Next we're going to split the dino body, what's left of it. And that's a common issue. I was going to mention it if it didn't happen, but it happened, so there we go. The ball joints in the waist pop off whenever I try to transform this guy. Next we're just going to kind of lay the T-Rex arms so that they're kind of flat against the outsides there, and then just open up his mouth. And there we go. We have our classics Grimlock, and he's standing on his own mouth. Like, I'll actually bring the camera down. You can see he is standing on his own mouth. I'm sorry, that's just silly. I mean, on one hand, it's kind of clever because you have him. You have this very new and interesting way of using the dinosaur parts, because usually his head just ends up as part of the kibble on his back. You will have this very new and interesting way of transforming the legs without using, big parts of his tail. But the alternative is that you have this big piece of tail just kind of sitting here now, which you fold this part in, and then he, get a good grip on him because I don't want to knock him over. He now holds his tail like a weapon. A la Megatron, Beast Wars Megatron. He has a big tail whip weapon, and that's why it's flexy, because it's supposed to look like a whip. And I can appreciate that. It's just, it doesn't really scream Grimlock to me, and what that means is that instead of giving him a gun and a sword, now in order to have all the right accessories and have him hold them, you have to have this bayonet gun thing. And I mean, he can hold it. It works. But, I mean, I would have appreciated if they had given us an additional peg on the back here so that he could have kind of held it like this and at least used it as a sword. But no, now he just has this big stabby, cutty blade on his dinky little gun that doesn't resemble anything that Grimlock ever really used. And I don't know, I mean, it does some clever things. Like, aside from the fact that they don't really stand in place, the entire torso and shoulder transformation is really interesting. Kind of bummed out that it leaves the screw holes in the front, but what are you going to do? There have to be screw holes somewhere, so I don't really deduct points for it. Not that I score points, but I don't really deduct points for it. It's just, I don't know, it feels like they could have done better. And that's why I like the War for Cybertron, the Voyager class Grimlock that we got with the second Cybertron video game. Let's put it that way. The second recent video game. It was, in a lot of ways, that better version of this figure. It's still not perfect because it's kind of hollow and stuff, and I believe I did talk about that in the review, but it's at least better than this, and it at least transforms and looks like Grimlock. This guy, he only kind of peripherally looks like Grimlock. Let's actually look at some of the details here. You can see in this mode, we have this exposed pelvic area that kind of resembles something you'd see on Grimlock. The chest is kind of Grimlocky, but it's also, I don't know, very different, especially with this giant hinge sitting on it. The only thing that really screams Grimlock to me is the very nice head sculpt, which also kind of has light piping. You can kind of see it's just not very good light piping. But it's a very Grimlock head sculpt, and I like it a lot. But really, it's not enough to save this figure and make it a good Grimlock figure for one reason. I'll show it off right now. He's only marginally taller than this guy. And if you recall my review of the R.I.D. 2015 Grimlock, the main issue I had with it is that it was too small. You have Classic Optimus Prime, who, I'm not sure where he is, or I would have brought him out, stands about here. And you have the new Combiner Wars Optimus Prime that stands even higher. And next to them, this Grimlock, let's take him off to the side now, we don't really need him anymore. This Grimlock just, he's dinky. He's small. He's actually small compared to some other Classics Deluxes. Like, for example, the Sideswipe Sunstreaker mold, which I only own as Red Alert, and I'm also not sure where he is, because I got him out for a review, and I kind of forgot where I put him. But that's beside the point. He's a little bit taller than this guy. He stands about here. And, I'm sorry, but that's just unacceptable to me. And, like I said, I don't hate this figure. I actually like it. It's one of the first Classics figures I bought, and it's Grimlock, so I've got that whole nostalgia thing kind of coloring my opinion of it, and that's probably why I like it. But I do like it. It's just, it doesn't live up to the name Grimlock, and I can certainly understand why quite a few people don't like this figure much at all. And it's for all of those reasons that I do acknowledge that this is, well, it's not a good Classics figure. There are a lot of really good Classics figures. The standard for Classics was more or less really good figures. This one just didn't live up to that. And part of that is that it was from pretty early in the run of Classics, from what I understand. So maybe they just hadn't hit their stride yet. I don't know. It just doesn't quite live up. And looking at my collection, trying to find a not-so-good Classics figure to review today, it really came down to this one. Or one other, which we will get to eventually. But, well, he's just a whole other story. Real quick, just because I feel obligated to, let's talk about articulation. This guy, he does have the same articulation in the arms as he did is in the Beast Mode legs. So you can get, that's not supposed to happen, you can get all kinds of motions out of him. Quite good, actually. His legs theoretically have good articulation, but, I mean, they're on these ball joints at the hips, but they're loose ball joints. I mean, literally just I applied almost no force and that just popped right off. But they do rotate at the hip, move in and out at the hip. I guess that's why this is on the hinge, because you can lift that up to get slightly more articulation. The knee, it bends. I mean, it clearly bends. But you don't really see the bend, especially from the outside, because of the way the dyno neck ends up. Overall, I think the legs on these, they're just transforming again. The legs on this guy is, I mean, they're clever. I've mentioned I think they're clever. It's just they're not fully. It's not a fully realized idea, and it ends up detracting from the figure more than it adds to it. And I just kind of wish they were different. And there's no getting around that because they're not. Yeah, that's about it for this review, guys. I hope you enjoyed it, because I certainly enjoyed making it. Please help me out, like and subscribe, and leave a comment down below if you feel so inclined. In the description down below, you'll find links to all the other things I'm working on, including a link to my blog post with my entire collection listed. Check it out, and if you see anything in it that you would like me to review, let me know and I will see what I can do. This has been Awesome John 22, and I will talk to you guys later.